All it took was one pair of sneakers. Shedeur Sanders didn't announce it with a statement or a hashtag. He let his feet do the talking. When images surfaced of the Colorado quarterback rocking Caitlin Clark's signature shoes, the internet didn't just react. It erupted. The move wasn't random. It was a carefully chosen moment in an era where athletes use what they wear to say what matters. It told a story of visibility, of crossing the sports divide to spotlight a woman who's changed the game for good. And it worked.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Sanders' subtle but calculated gesture hit harder than any press release. It disrupted gender norms in sports fashion and exposed the power of peer-driven support. His influence made clear that allyship can be both stylish and seismic. In a landscape still catching up to equality, his action modeled how genuine recognition, especially from male athletes, can push boundaries, ignite dialogue, and reshape how female athletes are viewed across all platforms. Shedeur Sanders asked reporters about Caitlin Clark while standing in her signature sneakers. And just like that, the internet collapsed into applause. It wasn't a stage campaign. It wasn't a coordinated brand moment. It was an organic, intentional, and unmistakably bold move by one of college football's most visible athletes. A quarterback from one of the most scrutinized programs in the country, the son of Deion Sanders, choosing to rep a female athlete in a moment where everyone was watching. And it landed like thunder. One move, one question, one sneaker choice, and suddenly, Shedeur had sparked a cultural reset. The fact that he asked reporters about Caitlin Clark while repping her shoes wasn't just a casual flex. It was a strategic disruption of the status quo. This is a sports world that has, for years, boxed athletes in. Men talk about men's sports, women uplift women's sports, and gender divides stay neatly in place. But not here. Not this time. Shedeur didn't just wear the shoes. He used his voice. And he used his platform in a way that made every media outlet, every brand, and every fan take a closer look. Because this wasn't about clout. It wasn't about being trendy. It was about shifting a narrative that's been stale and unequal for far too long. For decades, women's sports have existed in a vacuum of underfunding, undercoverage, and underrespect. Athletes like Caitlin Clark have had to carry the weight of the sport's growth on their backs while breaking records and drawing record viewership, without the same support or visibility given to their male counterparts. And now, a male football star is helping tip the scale. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. It wasn't loud. It wasn't preachy. It was a calm, confident statement. This is what support looks like. Shedeur Sanders showed up in Caitlin Clark's signature sneakers, on purpose, at a time when her name is becoming synonymous with excellence in women's basketball. He knew the cameras would be rolling. He knew the questions would come. And instead of brushing off the moment, he doubled down, pointing it back at her, at the importance of recognizing greatness no matter what sport or gender it comes from. This is what influence looks like in 2025. Athletes aren't just athletes anymore. They're brands. They're culture drivers. And their decisions, especially the unscripted ones, carry real weight. A single outfit can start a national conversation. A single post can redirect attention to an issue that's been ignored for years. A single shout-out can uplift an entire community. And this time, the message couldn't be missed. Caitlin Clark is not just a women's basketball star. She's the star. And athletes like Shedeur know that ignoring her now would be both foolish and disrespectful. Because the numbers speak for themselves. Clark is dominating on every front. Ratings, attendance, social media, and sales. Her signature sneakers? Sold out again and again. Her games? Broadcast breaking. Her name? Known across every sports circle, even those who never watched women's basketball before this year. So for Shedeur to center her in his spotlight is a move that transcends the usual boundaries of sport. It's not just cross-sport support, it's cross-gender visibility. And this is where it hits hardest. For years, male athletes have been considered the default faces of athletic culture. Their endorsements are taken seriously. Their gear is universal. Their opinions are amplified. So, when one of them uses that privilege to amplify a female athlete without any brand forcing him to do so, it cuts through all the industry noise. It makes people notice. And what it reinforces, loudly and clearly, is that Caitlin Clark is not waiting for validation. She's already in the conversation. Shedeur simply made sure the spotlight didn't miss her. And it wasn't just the sneakers, it was the way it happened. He didn't do a commercial. He didn't post a heavily edited video. He just showed up, wearing her name, and used the media moment to redirect attention where it's been lacking. That's the kind of visibility female athletes have been demanding and often not receiving for years. This is what it looks like when male athletes actually use their platforms to challenge disparities in sports. Because the reality is, we're still in a space where women's sports, despite the growth, still have to prove themselves 10 times over. Still have to fight for investment. Still get less screen time, fewer resources, and softer marketing pushes. That's not a reflection of talent. It's a reflection of bias. And when someone like Shedeur Sanders steps into that gap, even briefly, it signals a shift. It tells fans, this is what respect looks like. It tells brands, you need to move faster. It tells athletes, your platform is a tool. Use it. What's more, the ripple effect of this moment is already in motion. Sports media ran with it. Fan accounts spread it. Casual viewers took notice. And more importantly, the idea that female athletes deserve equal respect and endorsement support hit a broader, more mainstream audience. All without a single press release. That's the power of organic athlete-driven support. It cuts deeper. It lasts longer. And it forces people to think differently. Not because they were told to, but because they saw it done differently. And here's where it really lands. This moment is now part of a bigger movement. We're watching an undeniable rise in women's sports, from college arenas to sneaker drops to streaming numbers. Caitlin Clark is just one part of that, but she's a massive part. And now, her name is being carried across platforms, into locker rooms and highlight reels, by someone who knows exactly what visibility means. Shedeur Sanders didn't just wear the sneakers. He asked reporters about Caitlin Clark. He didn't wait to be asked about her. He brought her name into the room, front and center, because he wanted to. That's the moment the culture cracked. Not because someone told him to say it, but because it mattered to him. This is what athlete allyship looks like. And it's not loud or branded or polished. It's clear, deliberate, and necessary. So where do we go from here? That's up to everyone watching. Athletes, fans, brands, media. Are we going to wait for moments like this to happen once in a while? Or are we going to start treating them as the new standard? Are we going to keep dividing male and female sports visibility? Or are we finally going to acknowledge that greatness is greatness, no matter where it comes from? Because Shedeur Sanders just gave the industry a blueprint. He didn't just support Caitlin Clark. He centered her. That's how you build equity. Not with campaigns, with actions. Let us know what you think. Was this the kind of cultural shift we've been waiting for? Should more athletes take this approach and use their spotlight to lift each other up, no matter what sport or gender they represent? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like if you believe athletes should support each other across the board. Share this if you're ready for a sports culture where these moments aren't rare, they're expected. And subscribe so you don't miss the next time someone breaks the internet just by wearing the right pair of shoes. Because this moment wasn't just about footwear. It was about power, progress, and showing the world what sports could be when the barriers fall. And here's the part that cannot be overstated. Shedeur Sanders didn't just create a viral moment. He carved a space for a new kind of cultural standard in sports. When a top-tier male football player steps up, without prompting, and brings attention to a female basketball player by name, in her sneakers, and during his own media time, he's not just offering support. He's flipping the power dynamic. He's saying, this isn't just my platform. I know who else deserves to be on it. And that right there, that's what shook the internet. Not because it was shocking, but because it never happens. This is the sports world we've grown used to. One where athletes are siloed. Women in women's sports, fighting for scraps of attention. Men in men's sports, expected to stay in their lane. Even though women's sports are soaring in popularity, even though names like Caitlin Clark are dominating headlines and smashing viewership records. The cultural machine is still slow to catch up. It takes someone from inside the system, someone like Shedeur Sanders, to stop the scroll and interrupt the narrative. Because he wasn't asked about Caitlin Clark. He brought her up on his own, in a press conference. That's not casual. That's calculated. That's a conscious use of visibility. He knew the room was watching. He knew the cameras were on. And instead of riding solo on the hype train, he pulled Clark into the spotlight with him. And not as a guest, not as an inspiration, but as a peer, as someone whose name belongs in the conversation, equal in impact and deserving of every ounce of attention the culture can offer. And when he did that, the internet responded with a resounding yes. Because we've reached a tipping point, a cultural breaking point where visibility in sports is no longer confined to who gets paid the most or who plays the biggest game. It's about who's moving the needle. And Caitlin Clark, without question, has moved the needle. So when Shedeur wears her shoes and speaks her name, he's validating what millions already know, that she's not just a star in her own lane. She is the lane. This moment also spoke volumes about the evolution of athlete influence. There was a time, not long ago, when this kind of gesture would have been filtered through PR teams and sponsorship deals. But now, athletes are calling the shots. They're bypassing the brand machine entirely. They're choosing who they amplify, what they wear, what they say, and the world is watching in real time. That's why this moment hit different. It didn't feel commercial. It didn't feel performative. It felt real. And that kind of authenticity, it sticks. It lingers in culture. It doesn't disappear after the news cycle fades. Because while brands are still figuring out how to talk about inclusion and gender equity without tripping over themselves, athletes like Shedeur are showing it. No campaign needed. And here's the real impact. Moments like this create space for others to follow. There's a ripple effect. When a male athlete of Shedeur's status publicly embraces a female peer's success, through fashion, through words, through unprompted praise, it opens a door. It gives permission for other athletes to do the same. It normalizes what should have always been normal. Respect across sport, across gender, across platform. And for Caitlin Clark, this wasn't about her needing validation. She's already done more than enough to earn every accolade, endorsement, and headline. But what Shedeur did was extend her reach into a different space, a different audience, a different culture that might not have been paying close enough attention. And now, they are. Because when someone like Shedeur Sanders, known for his swagger, his confidence, his lineage, and his command of the spotlight, chooses to shine that light on someone else, people listen. Especially when that someone else is a woman in a sport still clawing its way into mainstream equality. Let's be clear, this wasn't just a cute crossover moment. It was a challenge to every athlete, every brand, and every sports journalist still treating women's sports like a footnote. It said, this is what leadership looks like. It said, this is how you use a platform. It said, you don't need a campaign budget to do the right thing. And the response proved that people are more than ready for this kind of sports culture. One where visibility isn't guarded, it's shared. One where success isn't siloed, it's celebrated. One where athletes don't have to wait for the system to catch up. They just go ahead and change it themselves. Because at the end of the day, this wasn't just about Caitlin Clark sneakers. It was about what those sneakers represented. They were a symbol of progress, of recognition, of finally seeing female athletic greatness treated as cultural currency. And Shedeur Sanders wore them not as a fashion statement, but as a message that women's success belongs in every room, every league, every conversation. And when he asked reporters about her, that was the mic drop. That was him saying, you should already be talking about her. That was him doing what sports media, fans, and even entire companies still struggle to do consistently. Give women their flowers in the moment, not after the fact. So here's the takeaway. This moment matters. Not just because of who was involved, but because of what it revealed. That the walls around gender and visibility in sports aren't permanent. They're already cracking. And when athletes take control of the narrative, when they speak each other's names, wear each other's gear, and share their platforms without waiting for permission. The industry has no choice but to follow. So, let's ask the real question now. What happens next? Will more athletes follow Shedeur's lead? Will we start seeing women's sports products normalized in every locker room, in every sneaker drop, in every broadcast mention? Will brands finally stop dragging their feet and start catching up with the reality that athletes like Caitlin Clark move markets, with or without their support? Or will this be treated like a moment instead of a movement? Because the truth is, it's only a moment if we let it be. Shedeur opened the door. Now it's on everyone else, athletes, media, fans, and brands, to walk through it. So let's keep the pressure on. Let's keep the momentum moving. Let's hold space for moments like this to become standard, not special. Because support like this shouldn't be revolutionary. It should be routine. Here's what no one can deny anymore. The game is changing. The old model, where men's sports dominate the cultural conversation and women's sports are left to build their audience, is collapsing. Not quietly, not gradually, but loudly and publicly. And at the center of that shift, and one of the most viral pivots we've seen in months, is a pair of sneakers with Caitlin Clark's name on them, worn by Shedeur Sanders. You can't overstate what that image did. This wasn't just a quarterback supporting a basketball player. This was a signal flare, one that lit up the gap between how male athletes and female athletes are typically seen, marketed, and valued. And by casually walking across that divide in her shoes, Shedeur showed the world how small that gap really should be. And what's wild is how simple it was. No speech, no corporate sponsorship, no activist branding. Just the choice to wear a pair of sneakers and name-check the woman who designed them during a media scrum that he was supposed to dominate. He didn't have to do that. That's what makes it matter. Because for years, we've heard every excuse in the book for why women's sports don't get the same treatment. That there's not enough interest, not enough market share, not enough cultural clout. But then along comes Caitlin Clark, shattering attendance records, breaking TV viewership ceilings, and selling out signature shoes in minutes. And still, the attention isn't universal. Still, women like her are being treated like exceptions, not the rule. That's where Shedeur stepped in. He didn't wait for the media to bring her up. He brought her up, in his moment, on his stage. That kind of support, authentic, unsolicited, and grounded in genuine respect, is exactly what's been missing. Because it's one thing to say women deserve equal recognition. It's another to take your own spotlight and share it without hesitation. Shedeur wasn't elevating Caitlin. She doesn't need elevation. He was just putting the camera where it already should have been pointing. And that shift? It made a statement far bigger than any brand ad ever could. Because in a culture that still separates men's gear and women's gear, where wearing a female athlete's signature shoe can still feel like a novelty, Shedeur made it look normal. Effortless. Cool. He didn't perform allyship. He lived it. And the reaction spoke for itself. Social media didn't just cheer. It erupted. Not because this was some shocking twist, but because it showed what's possible when athletes lead the way. It proved that progress in sports culture doesn't always come from billion-dollar campaigns or carefully crafted diversity initiatives. Sometimes, it comes from a 21-year-old football player wearing the right shoes and asking the right questions in front of the right cameras. And when people saw that, they felt it. Because if Shedeur can do that, if he can casually break a decades-old gender narrative in the most unbothered, confident way possible, then why can't every other athlete? Why can't every player with a platform uplift the people who deserve it, regardless of the logo on their chest or the league they play in? This is the new frontier of athlete influence. Not just who they sign with, but who they stand with. Shedeur Sanders stood with Caitlin Clark. Full stop. And he didn't just wear her shoes. He made sure everyone knew whose shoes they were. That detail matters. He could have worn them and said nothing. He could have let reporters speculate. But instead, he doubled down. He said her name. He made it clear. And in doing that, he did what the sports industry has failed to do over and over again. He put a woman's name at the center of a story that wasn't originally about her. That's how things change. We talk a lot about equity in sports like it's some vague, long-term goal. But equity starts with visibility. with the moments that pull one person out of their usual circle and put them into the broader conversation. Caitlin Clark was already there. Shedeur just brought new eyes to the table. And let's be real, this wasn't just about solidarity. This was about taste, about recognition of skill, about greatness recognizing greatness, period. No qualifiers, no asterisks. Shedeur didn't wear those sneakers because it was trendy or convenient. He wore them because they're hers, because they mean something, because she's earned it, and because he knows that his fans, his peers, and the sports media will take notice of what he promotes and what he prioritizes. It's the definition of platform awareness. But the best part? He made it look like no big deal. That's how you normalize change. You stop announcing it like it's revolutionary, and you just live it like it's obvious. Because it should be obvious. Caitlin Clark should already be a household name. Her gear should already be unisex. Her shoes should already be seen on every athlete who appreciates excellence. And thanks to Shedeur, that's now a conversation we're actually having. It also forces brands into reflection. If one football player can shift culture with a pair of sneakers, what are billion-dollar companies doing with all that ad money? Where's the consistent support? Where's the cross-promotion? Where's the energy? This moment pulled back the curtain. It showed that real support doesn't require a campaign. It just requires intention. And now that Shedeur has cracked the door open, the question becomes, who's next? Which athletes will stop playing by the old rules and start creating new ones? Which brands will stop lagging behind cultural moments and start catching up to them? And which fans will continue to show up not just for the men they already follow, but for the women who've been leading the charge this whole time? The culture is ready. The audience is here. The precedent has been set. So what's the excuse now? Let us know how this hit for you. Are we finally seeing the beginning of real change, or was this just another viral flash in the pan? Should more male athletes use their spotlight to rep women's sports? Or is this kind of visibility still too rare? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like if you believe support like this should happen more often. Share this with someone who still thinks athletes can't drive social change. And subscribe for the next breakdown of the cultural moments rewriting the rules of sports. One headline, one press conference, one pair of sneakers at a time. Because the future of sports doesn't look like the past. It looks like Shedeur and Clark's kicks, and a whole new generation not asking permission to show up for each other.